Hey kiddos, so today we're gonna focus on the way transportation changed in the 1800s. The last thing we talked about is how new inventions kind of shaped the way of life of the American society in the 1800s, while these new inventions also helped in how Americans traveled throughout the United States. So, until the early 1800s, the easiest and cheapest way to travel around the United States was by using the rivers that were available on the land. However, because most of these rivers did not connect with each other, the Americans had to build canals. And what canals are is kind of like this picture that you see. It's a human built waterway. So it's kind of like a bridge for water to connect to from one waterway to another. So these ditches are man made, and they're able to connect to a different body of water in another location. So, with the building of these canals, we have a very famous one in New York called the Erie Canal. In 1817, the governor of New York wanted to begin a project to connect the Great Lakes with the Hudson River and from there lead to the Atlantic Ocean. It seemed like a really difficult task, and it cost $7 million to build. So at first, it was a 350-mile canal, and people didn't think it was going to happen because, for one, it was so expensive, and because it was so big, they didn't really think it was possible. The governor would ask investors, even from Europe, to help raise money. And an investor is someone who kind of puts in money into a project early on because hopefully that project is going to be successful and make more money for those people. Eventually, in July, he was able to raise all the money and begin working on the project. So it was difficult and dangerous work because they had to dig into the land, into different 350 miles worth of land. To solve this problem, the governor hired immigrants from Europe to build the canals because most of those people who are coming over to the United States are looking for work for a better life for them and their families. So these immigrants were willing to work hard on this difficult and dangerous task. Another problem that they faced was that the land that was along Lake Erie was taller, was higher than the land that was along the Hudson River. So, in order to level the land, the engineers had to use a lock system, and it's kind of like an elevator. So it lifts the water to help the boats get into the next level of the canal. Eventually, once all of this process was done, the Erie Canal opened in 1825. So it took about 8 years to build the canal. But now, with its opening, it was a huge success, and it was an instant success because now products could be shipped from the east to the west and back quickly and also cheaply. So, because of this, New York City became an even greater center of shipping and trade. So, it was already very popular for trading and shipping, but now with the opening of the Erie Canal, more products can be shipped all throughout the east and west very quickly and efficiently. So another way Americans would travel in the early 1800s were stagecoaches. And it's like the picture on top where it's a horse-drawn carriage. And the horses would travel on basically dirt roads. A lot of these roads were filled with potholes, there were tree stumps, and when it rained, the roads were very muddy and swampy. So even on a good day, it was really difficult to travel along the road, and it was very slow. In 1811, the federal government, so the national government that's in charge of the entire United States, decided to build a national road. So remember when we talked about the explorers who went from the Appalachian Mountains into the west and they found that Cumberland Road? So they built a national road from Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois. And this would become America's first highway. So it's kind of like the first freeway in the United States. And it was very successful because this new stone and gravel road linked the east, and now it would be able to travel to the western frontier. So more people were able to go into the west and live in that area, or just travel and ship goods to this area too. Transportation also improved with the invention of the steam engine. And a steam engine uses steam to power the motor. So it's kind of like that heat from the steam powers the motor, and it produces so much power that before, the power from the horses that would pull the stagecoaches, now this new steam engine can pull heavier loads, and they didn't have to rely on the horses to pull these loads anymore. Another invention was the steamboat, and Robert Fulton was an inventor who had the idea of making a steam engine that can power a boat upstream. And he worked many years on his design. And on 1807, he was finally able to finalize his design and his plan of how to work this steamboat. And some people basically kind of made fun of his boat because they didn't think it was going to be possible, because usually the only way the boats would be able to travel back then was if they were propelled by like rowing it, or if it followed the flow of the water. So now he wanted to take a boat that's going opposite of the water, but he believed this was gonna be successful because the steam engine was going to power it. So the power that came from the engine was going to be enough power to make the boat go upstream. So finally, in 1807, he took a 150-mile trip, and he went from the Hudson River to Albany, New York, and it was 150 miles. So he was able to complete this in 32 hours. And normally, a regular boat would take 8 to 11 days to complete this. So now he was able to complete that same trip in pretty much 1.5 days, when it would usually take 8 to 11 days to complete. So with that, more and more people started to make steamboats, and by 1855, more than 700 steamboats would be able to take people and goods along the rivers of the United States. And this also helped people migrate from the east to the west also. And lastly, another way that the transportation changed was the way railroads were built. So they had already had these railroads built along the United States, but horses would pull the coaches over the rails. In 1814, there was a British inventor named George Stephenson, and he was the one who built the first train with a steam engine inside. and they nicknamed them the Iron Horse because before horses would pull these coaches, but now the train was made out of iron, so they named it the Iron Horse. Then an American merchant built a smaller steam engine train with it's called a locomotive, and he raced against a horse-drawn carriage. And even though the little train lost, soon we would have railroads become the main form of transportation in the nation. And if you see on this map, in 1850, all of the red were different railroads that were used along the United States. I don't have a picture on the slides, but in your textbook on page 522, there's a pretty neat map that outlines all of the major roads that were used in the United States, as well as the canals that were built that helped connect the different waterways, and also which rivers were used for transportation. So for today's assignment, what I want you to do is there's a Google Doc that's already formatted for you, and it has all of this information on there. So you just have to open it up and type or write in the Google Doc. And what I want you to do, so you're going to identify the 3 types of travel. So stagecoaches, steam engine, and the steamboat. And this was in the 1800s. So I want you to give as much detail as possible of these 3 different types of travel. And you can use the information that I explained here, and you can also use your textbook on page 522 to help you answer. Also, please include which of these 3 was the fastest and which one was the slowest. Make sure it's attached to Google Docs, and then submit your assignment. Next, we are going to talk about who was in charge of the nation during this time. So Andrew Jackson, which was one of the 1812 war heroes, is the president. So we'll talk about his presidency tomorrow and what kind of policies he had in place. Alrighty? So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you later.